Hello everyone, welcome back to our series, Does Evolution Make Sense? This is Module 6. It's the final one in the series. It is the summary, conclusions, and a spicy postscript. Our agenda is pretty straightforward. We'll have a summary instead of a recap. We'll discuss the three models and the conclusion we arrive from those three models. We'll explain why this matters and what to do about it. Then we'll get into some spicy postscript with a discussion about the multiverse and the nonsense detector. We'll speculate on who did the directing if we're talking about directed macroevolution. We'll touch briefly on does this support the God hypothesis? And we'll look into perhaps there might be a weakness of science here that we need to explore a little more. First, the disclaimer. Do not shoot the messenger. I am not against science. My goal here is to balance out what I call the romantic opinions of science with real science. You may respond emotionally to what I'm about to say, highly likely, especially if you work in a scientific field or university. Please, if you're having a negative emotional response, ask, why am I having this negative emotional response? Of course, having a negative emotional response doesn't mean that what I'm presenting is untrue. Please consider whether it's true or not. My credentials are here. I have a PhD in electrical engineering. I published in engineering, biology, and philosophy journals. I've taught critical thinking skills to students. So in module 1, this set the context. We asked, why does evolution feel confusing? There are 4 questions we addressed. How do we define evolution is the important one. We found there are 8 definitions and we focused on one of them, and that was undirected macroevolution. We asked, why do smart people believe in undirected macroevolution? We'll touch on that too. And we saw there are many non-scientific reasons. And we asked, is there a religious component to evolution? We found there was. And we asked, how can we detect nonsense? And we said, using this nonsense detector. Let's dig into each of those. Let's summarize each of those now. So what is undirected macroevolution? We structured the answer to that as an equation. We said undirected macroevolution is equal to chance mutation plus chance selection plus time. This is covered in video 1.1. Now this definition leaves no room for God or intelligent intervention. Just as a reminder, it goes against common sense. We find in reality, as time goes on, complex things don't become more complex by chance events. Instead, as time goes on, we see complex things break down over time. You have that picture in the right corner where we have the pristine robot car manufacturing plant, and then we have the rusty old dingy car manufacturing plant. Our experience would say that pristine plant would become the dingy plant. Undirected macroevolution asks us to believe that that dingy plant could become that pristine plant. Well, we never observe an exception to this common experience that complex things break down over time. They don't get more complex. Please review this at video 1.1. Then in 1.2, we asked, why do smart people buy into undirected macroevolution? Well, we found out that they may have started with the wrong assumptions very early on. They saw the cell was just simple jelly called protoplasm, not realizing it's as complex as a space station. In biology, mathematics is not helpful. And so the scientific biological models and theories that are developed are actually crude when compared to physics or chemistry. And because they're crude, they can deceive the scientists. We also saw that scientists are human, and they don't want to jeopardize a salary of promotion potential by rocking the boat. Is it really worth to a biology scientist, a researcher, to say that undirected macroevolution never happened, and then only to find that their research funding is cut? So in this case, what we have here is a social echo chamber. We also found that people assume repeated phrases from authorities are true. So if we find out that, oh, undirected macroevolution is the way that everything came about, all life came about, and that's repeated enough and enough and enough, we found out that people will assume it's true. And the Ash conformity experiment proved this. Then we get into a different set of reasons. We found that biologists may purposely stifle debate about evolution's flaws. Why? Well, they fear if they expose the flaws of undirected macroevolution, that this is an opening for creationism to be smuggled in. We also saw that atheists don't want God to exist, and so they may be willfully and purposely blind to any evidence that he may exist, which means they may be willfully and purposely blind to directed macroevolution. Finally, atheists may actively work against the notion that God is involved. It's not enough that they ignore it, it's that they work against it. Why would they do this? Well, we'll see next. Undirected macroevolution is the creation story of the religion of atheism. In video 1.3, we brought up the notion of religious evolution. Because scientists are human, sometimes scientists make claims that are not scientific, even though they claim they are science. They overreach or they exaggerate. They claim things that don't have evidence. In some cases, they may even fabricate evidence or delude themselves that evidence exists for things that they wish to be true. And these claims address religious questions. These are important claims because they are a piece of that scientist's way of viewing the world, their worldview. And for the religion atheism, undirected macroevolution can act as its creation story. It explains how man came to be, a very religious question. So evolution as religion is when a scientist makes religious claims using evolutionary language or concepts. If you want to look into this some more, go to video 1.3. In video 1.4, we introduced the nonsense detector. The nonsense detector says if something doesn't fit our experience and common sense, then it's probably nonsense. Again, if something doesn't fit our experience and common sense, then it's probably nonsense. Let's take an example. A politician says that men with a mental illness should not be able to stay in a women's shelter. Well, this does fit common sense because you wouldn't want men in a women's shelter because the women there have been harmed by men. And they would certainly not feel safe if they saw men walking around. So this fits our common sense. It also fits our experience in that that's normally how women's shelters are organized. Now, let's adjust this a little. Let's say a politician says that men with a mental illness must be able to stay in a women's shelter. Why? Because of their mental illness. For example, if a man thinks they're a woman, well, then they should be allowed to stay in a women's shelter. Well, let's back up here, right? We wouldn't let a man into a woman's shelter if they said they were a man. So why would we let men into a women's shelter if they said they were a woman? That makes no sense. It also doesn't fit our experience that this is how women would feel safe in a women's shelter, especially if they've been battered. So this is nonsense. There is a cost to the nonsense detector, and that is when you detect nonsense, you are obligated to disagree with an expert. If they fail the nonsense detector, it's not enough to walk away and let them be deluded. You actively have to be an agent of change because who else will do it? The other side of this is, let's say an expert says something and you think it doesn't fit your experience and common sense, and you challenge him on it. Well, maybe he'll educate you and you will learn something and you have a dialogue. And so this obligation to disagree is actually a good thing. With a little humility, either he will be corrected or you will be corrected, or you'll both come to a place where you disagree. But at least you've had an opportunity to dialogue about it. So for more details about the nonsense detector, please review video 1.4.